Thoughts on the Kingdom, Regeneration, Part 2. Now, in the previous discourse, I mentioned the fact that Nicodemus could have found the doctrine of regeneration written about in the Old Covenant, and I want to turn to that now in this second discourse on regeneration. I do so by going to Ezekiel chapter 36, verses 26 and 27. Now, of course, this Ezekiel prophecy is couched in the language of the Old Covenant. Of course it is. Ezekiel was living in the days of the Old Covenant, and he was speaking to the people of the Old Covenant, Israel. Now, one expects, therefore, that it will be Old Covenant language, but he is speaking of the New Covenant. He is speaking of the kingdom. He is speaking of regeneration. It may not be all that obvious on a skimming reading of the passage, but that is what this passage is about. That is the fundamental meaning of it. That's the way I'm taking it anyway. So Ezekiel 36, verses 26 and 27. This is the promise. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. Now, that's precisely the definition that I used of regeneration in John chapter 3. You have to have a new heart. The natural heart cannot see the kingdom. Why not? Because the kingdom is not of this age, not of this world. It's not belonging to this system. It's a new kingdom. We've seen that, the newness of the kingdom. I've given 3 discourses on the newness. And this newness demands a new heart, and I will give you a new heart. Otherwise, you meet that brick wall we met in John chapter 1, namely the Jews. Although they were Jews and had all the old system, when Christ came, the King, the Messiah, the fulfillment of the prophecies, they didn't recognize him and they didn't welcome him. You need a new heart, and here is the promise of it. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. You need a new spirit. You need the Spirit of God, in fact. You need a new attitude, a new mind, a new will. I will remove from you your heart of stone, the dead heart, the cold heart, and give you a heart of flesh. This is not the same meaning as flesh in the New Testament when it speaks of carnality. This is speaking of a living heart. Instead of a dead heart, a living heart. Instead of a stony heart, a cold heart, a warm heart, a believing heart. And I will put my spirit in you and move you. Unless we're regenerate, we should be never moved. Unless we're regenerate, we shall never see. Unless we're regenerate, we shall never come. Christ says, repent and believe. John says, repent. But how can we repent when we're dead? I will give you a new spirit, a new mind. I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws, and so on. Now, the kingdom is not mentioned here, but the ruler is mentioned in the sense that his laws, his commandments, his directions, or decrees are set out. And we are given grace in this new covenant by this promise. Those who benefit by it do get this new heart to obey this king. And of course they see the king and they see the kingdom and they believe the king and they trust the king and they rely upon the king and they enter the kingdom. But until they're born again, they can be religious, they can be churchified, they can be made Christendom converts, if you'd like to call it that. They can be made to go to church or chapel or whatever it is. They can take part in services and meetings and so-called. Yeah, all that kind of thing. But to be in the kingdom, even to see the kingdom, they must be born again. Nicodemus, you should have known this. You don't know this? You don't understand it? Look at it. Look at your old covenant. Look at the promise. Look at the prophecy. This is God's sovereign act. Born of the Spirit. This is, I will do it. I will give. I will give. I will give. It's not works. It's not efforts, not deservings. It's a sovereign intervention by God. I stress this because I said in the previous discourse, I believe, I am convinced that this is dying out with the most dreadful, dire consequences. May God bless these simple discourses to bring this back on the agenda. Are you born again, my friend? Unless you're born again, you will never see the kingdom. But God's promise is in his covenant, the new covenant. I will give you a new heart. May we all have that new heart, that new spirit, that new mind, not only to see the kingdom, but to enter it.